Now you're listening to Fantastic Formosa with Joh Abrams in Taipei. This is Fantastic Formosa. I'm Joh Abrams, and we have a very special guest today. His name is Jerome Keating. Jerome Keating. He's a doctor. Keating, we should say.
Right.
All right. And he has been in Taiwan longer than many of you have been alive. He is one of the few Americans I know that actually has a Taiwan passport. So that's really rare. And Jerome has written numerous books, but he didn't start his life out in Taiwan. He started out in America studying. What was the subject? Engineering?
No, my undergrad work was literature and philosophy, surprisingly enough. But that makes a good base for understanding human nature.
Wow, that's sort of how a good argument I make for my children learning Shakespeare and the Bible. I would have thought it would be an engineering or technology degree. Was that the University of Michigan?
Well, my undergrad work and first master's was at Notre Dame University. The Michigan degree, it's really a certificate to teach English as a second language.
Mm-hmm.
So I only spent one semester to get that, but Ann Arbor is a beautiful city.
Ann Arbor, Michigan, yes, it is. Many Taiwanese go there.
Right. Great university, great university town. Of course,
What year was this?
I was in the 60s.
Oh,
so,
wow.
yeah, so when I say great university town, a lot of things can go under the bridge between
Yes.
the 60s and now.
Right. Well, the drugs, the rock and roll, the hippie movement, the anti-war movement in Vietnam. Those are things I remember as a child, but you lived it. So that's amazing. I suppose you were a hippie.
I was a hippie in spirit, probably, and a little bit in dress. I don't know if you remember the fashions at that time, there were bell-bottom pants.
Yeah, that was the early 70s. I got the bell bottoms. Yeah, I had those. I wore those in junior high.
And there was the Nehru jacket.
Yes, that's good. They're in the 60s now. Oh, definitely. Yeah, see, back then, fashions in California would take about a year to catch up in the Midwest. Of course, the men would have long hair, and that was shocking back then, beards.
Right. Usually you had to have a beard or certainly try it out for a while.
Yeah. And, Volkswagen Beetle car, the whole thing, yeah. So
I remember one time I trimmed my beard down to, I don't know if you remember what was called the Fu Manchu mustache.
Yes. Those are goatees, right?
Yeah.
Basically. That's what the devil wears, all right? Now, if you're you can look pretty menacing. You can look like a troublemaker wearing those. I had one when I was younger and more muscular, weightlifter, and friends of mine told me to get rid of it because it made it more difficult to talk to me. So I thought that might be good advice if you want to meet people and learn about their country and culture. So Michigan must have been cold.
It was, but the coldest place I went, my doctorate is from Syracuse University.
That's New York, right?
It's right, upstate New York. And if you want cold, Syracuse.
Oh,
3 years in Syracuse is why I moved my family to Texas.
really? So you were down in Texas before you went to Notre Dame?
No. I went to Notre Dame from Chicago.
Okay.
But so Notre Dame was the first school,
Okay. Right.
And but Texas is after all my schooling, and then I was looking for a job and everything, and I said to my wife, we're finishing the doctorate. We've got a couple kids.
Wow. Yeah.
We don't have many possessions.
Right.
If we're going to move, this is the time to move.
Right.
You could put everything in one truck. And
Right.
she had a cousin in Texas and said there are a lot of universities and community colleges down here. So we just picked up and moved.
Right. So how many kids did you have?
I had 2 at the time. A third one was born in Texas.
Right.
So she's the only Texan in the family.
True Texan. Yeah. Okay. Well, then, how did you end up in technology?
Okay. I was principal of a school, and then I was working with and then I went to a university or college, Bishop College it was down there, and then I got a job because I had been working on an MBA at University of Texas at Dallas, and I got a job with Otis Engineering. Now, Otis Engineering, and not the elevator Otis, but it's a part of Halliburton, the Big Red. And this was the early 80s, and I thought, boy, I'm in Texas, I'm in oil. What more can you ask for, And then...
That was a radical change, actually, during that period because the Vietnam War was over, hippies were gone, everything went disco, and money was back. Having money was not considered a sin anymore. It was encouraged to be rich.
Right. No,
Yeah.
it was, I just felt I was set for life. And then the whole oil crash came with Saudi Arabia and everything, and we did not see it coming.
Right.
Our company was hiring people 2 weeks before we turned around and started laying them off.
Ooh. Oh my
And
God.
that to me, that leadership is, we're talking way back again.
Right.
But if you have a crash like that,
Right.
someone's missing something that
Yeah.
to do that flip around.
Yeah, I remember the oil embargo, Saudi oil embargo. That was a shock to Americans. We thought we were untouchable, and we had to wait for gas for an hour for our cars, and that shook us up. And we didn't our egos were hurt, I think. We didn't win Vietnam, and now we just got kicked in the butt by the Middle East oil producers.
For all of the youngsters out there in your crowd,
Right.
I'll just tell them, I remember one time in Texas, I was at one of these fill-your-own-tank gas stations, and the gas was 23 cents a gallon.
Okay. Yeah.
The people today can't even imagine the reality of that.
Right. Yeah. When I got my driver's license at 16, it was unbelievably cheap to get 20 cents maybe,
Yeah.
And that's where cruising came in. People would drive around in their cars all night, teenagers, and just get in trouble and have fun.
Cruising on a Sunday afternoon. You can Google that song.
Yeah, and they made it into a movie even with Richard Dreyfuss and Harrison Ford and some other interesting characters.
Yeah.
But So you were in Texas, and you got laid off, I guess.
Right.
All right.
And in a way, it turned out to be, and I don't know, and one side of me says I really would have liked to stayed with Halliburton, etc. But the other side, it turned out to be good because I went to work for the city of Dallas Transit System in their human resource department. And we were building a DART, Dallas Area Rapid Transit.
Mm-hmm.
And that would eventually lead to the offer of the job in Taiwan.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you were working on that program, and you ended up coming to Taipei and working on the Mucha line, or is it Brown line? What do we call that?
Mean in Texas or
in Taiwan?
in Taiwan. Okay. Well, let's step back. So the early project in Taiwan, and probably someone could research this, but the MRT in Taipei, at first it was run by the Brits. And I can't verify this, but my suspicions are that the U.S. put pressure on Taiwan that saying, we have a balance of payments deficit, and we should really get some American companies in here. And
oh, I see.
So because there's a good friend of mine, Bob Weir, who worked for both sides, but the Brits started in the early 80s, and we took over around 86, and there were three major companies from the U.S. that did the top tier of the project. On a massive project like that, there's a piece of the cake for everyone.
Uh-huh.
And
right.
You have three, usually someone at the top, and then they filter everything down. So the three companies at the top were Bechtel Engineering, Kaiser Engineering, and Parsons Brinkerhoff Engineering. And I had been offered the job by Bechtel Engineering, so I joined the Bechtel team. And they were on the triumvirate, call it, that was running the whole project.
I see.
And then we were filtering it out. Now, a lot of times people will say, oh, well, it must have been the French. No, the French were just a small part of it. The Brown Line, the Matra system, was just a very small part. I supervised them or critiqued them. They were the first one running, that's true. And it's the only four-car train. It's the only light rail among the whole heavy rail system.
Right.
Now, again, there are stories. In any big project, there's always a little bit of wheeling and dealing, I think. And I use that in a loose term, perhaps.
Sure.
But maybe
rumors.
Negotiating is a better word.
All right.
But the French had always wanted to get their system out of Europe. And the French, and so for the Taipei system, there were two programs, one by the Ministry of Transportation and the other by the city of Taipei. And the Ministry of Transportation program won out, but they allowed some, call it face-saving, part to the city of Taipei, where part of their plan was snatched into the Ministry of Transportation plan.
Okay.
And that's where the French came in.
I see.
They were kind of a concession. Now, the
well,
French...
you have to give them something.
My son-in-law is French. So,
oh, he is? All right.
But that's a different story and a different field. But the French are good negotiators in different ways for overseas. But some, it can be good and bad. And you would remember the Lafayette frigate scandal.
Yeah.
So that's the bad side.
Right.
But and this one, they got Matra in.
All right.
And Matra was therefore moving out of Europe and into Asia.
Right.
And that's why we have the Brown Line here.
I thought it was a very strange line in the very beginning. When I first came here, it wasn't operating, I think. It was 92.
Right, but it was the first one to open. It
But
runs
it-
well. I ride it, regularly.
But it was, it reminded me of something you might see at Disneyland.
Right.
It
They're
didn't have a
people
heavy,
mover in a way.
was not a heavy train that I was used to in like Washington D.C. or but yeah, I wondered about the design and why they chose that particular. Why didn't they put it underground? I guess to save cost. Was that one reason, or?
Right. And again, a lot of when a system goes in, there's a lot of jockeying to where the stations are put and who owns land where the station is.
Right. Property goes up.
So a lot of horse trading. And also, of course, you have to think, where is the best place for a station?
Right.
And that's where the horse trading comes in.
Right.
Who's got the land? Who's got this? Where is the best place? Also, you have to space your stations. But if you've got land, obviously you want to have a station near it because that raises the value of your land.
And was there a rule on the distance between stations? Because walking distance or whatever.
I think there was I don't know if it was a hard and fast rule, but there was a measured distance that you wanted to have access. So usually in most of the stations, you're either closer to one or the other if you're on a line.
Sure, yeah.
And that makes it, Taipei is a very convenient MRT system.
Right.
I use it regularly. When I use it, I really feel good about it. It looks good. It's sharp. The cars are not dilapidated. It's hard to believe
They clean them. Yeah.
that first line, the Matra, opened in '96. That's almost 30 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. Now the line from Damshui down to where it opened shortly after that.
And also another thing, and this is kind of for our friends at AIT and all that, when they designed the line and it went out to Nehu, my friend Bob Weir, who was on the trains part, and he was saying, people were saying, why are we going out to Nehu? There's nothing but open fields out here. You go out to Nehu now, and it's a booming area.
Right.
And AIT has their main offices there.
Right.
I used to like it when they were downtown here.
Right.
Now if I have to do any business, you got to really go out there.
Yeah, I remember that as well. When they wanted a new building because the old building had been left part of the Cold War military assistance advisory group, and it really was not an embassy design. Today's embassies are so well protected. So if you go to the one in Nehu, you'll notice it's on a hill, and it's a fortress basically.
Yeah, it is a fortress. It's not as accessible as the one that used to be on Xinyi.
Yeah, Xinyi was.
And they had another one at the corner of Xinyi and Jilong. I used to like to use their library.
That was part of the USIS, right? The United States Information Service. They had a library there. And they closed the USIS. One of the very few government programs they actually closed. They normally had more programs to a program, but they actually closed that one. I was shocked. I don't think anyone actually used their services. That was part of it.
It's a shame. It was a good library.
Yeah.
I did some research for some of my books there.
In the early days.
Because it had a lot of access to things, and I mean,
the old building was really interesting as well. I think it's still there, right? The building that they had it in.
Okay, I haven't checked. I should check, because And I'll tell you just one.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah.
Oh.
Go ahead, please.
One key thing that I always remember that was actually very related to Taiwan, and came into one of my books, is that in the 1950s, when Truman was president, and how Truman did an about-face from January 1950 to June 1950. In January, he was ready to throw in the towel on Chiang Kai-shek. And basically said, I'm not giving that bandit another... I'm not giving that man another cent.
Yeah, and he changed his mind very quickly.
And
the value.
But then, in June, Mao entered the Korean War.
Oh yeah! Wow.
And everything went complete.
Yeah, and we can forget. We forget about geopolitics sometimes. The island Formosa. Fortress Formosa, right? Whoever it belonged to over the centuries, it was certainly a powerful harbor and strategic trading hub as well. Oh my God! But the Korean War, Taiwan participated a little bit in that, I think, right?
Yeah, that was interesting because, as I remember, actually Chiang wanted to send troops.
Right, I
but
think
they
he did.
would not let him.
Yeah, I don't understand the reasoning, but yeah.
And I wasn't...
There were some secret missions
see
people
exactly
wrote about
why
later.
they were holding back on that.
It's a good question. We had I don't know if our listeners know, but we had U.S. military bases here in Taiwan, and we considered Taiwan in many ways to be our diamond in this area for military strategic purposes. And then for reasons that are related to geopolitics, which are often policy or fantasy, we left in 1979 and 1980, and I'm sure Taiwan is getting tired of being loved and then rejected and then loved, and we call it the passive aggressive style of relationship. Girls are good at this, I think, in America. But so you wrote some history books. One of the ones that I really loved was the Maps book.
Right. There was, the mapping of Taiwan. And that one's got kind of a subtitle. I'll see if I can read it for you here. Desired Economies, Coveted Geographies.
Wow, okay. And when did you write that?
That one was first written, the English version was in 2010, and then the Chinese translation was in, I think, around 2015. So it's bilingual now.
Now, it was published by a local publisher.
Right, by SMC, Nantian.
Okay. And this must have been a nightmare of research because you have to get pictures of old maps, right?
Well, it actually was not for me because the benefit I had is that my publisher often did works for the National Palace Museum and other major governments, so he had access to a lot of maps. And therefore, I could go and see which would be good maps to use.
Oh, wow.
And then I could also say, see if we can get this one or see if we can get that one. And there were other maps that weren't in that realm, but, we got a lot from there, from the archives. So
you're so lucky to have a friend with access at the perfect time.
Definitely.
Perfect time that you're trying to, so obviously What is what's the earliest map that you found of Taiwan?
Let's see. I think I would say there are some Chinese maps, and Taiwan has had different names.
Okay.
There's
I'm
a map
sure.
from the time of Matteo Ricci.
Which is what year?
There's some maps from the time of the Spanish, when the Spanish and the Portuguese first came into the area, and then the British and the Dutch followed that. And when you get into this, you get into, a secret world. Like, at that time, the Netherlands were under the Spanish Habsburgs, I believe.
Huh, okay.
And a guy by the name of Linschoten, and Spain and Portugal were joined under Philip II. And I'd have to check my history on this, but Linschoten was working, he was Dutch, but because the Netherlands were part of this Habsburg Empire, he was working in Goa for the Archbishop of Goa, who was Portuguese. And he therefore had access to a lot of the maps, and he copied down, because everyone was trying to figure how to get to the Spice Islands. They weren't interested in Taiwan. They were interested in the Spice Islands, which were worth their weight in gold and were below the Philippines.
Right, okay.
And it's only later that they figured out, hey, we can also make money in Taiwan.
Right, yeah. So the first name was just rock or island or?
I'd have to go back. There were Laqueo Major, Laqueo Minor, and
all right.
With
Portuguese maps and other Dutch words maybe.
If people did not trade with that country, they were more sketchy in their early days.
Right, of course.
And a lot of times you can tell the accuracy of the map by where they have the Tropic of Cancer.
Okay.
Now, the Tropic of Cancer runs through Taiwan around Tainan area. But some maps have it above Taiwan, some below Taiwan.
Oh, really?
And they have the, different ways. And some maps see Taiwan as 3 islands just because they're passing by and they see 3 different mountain ranges.
Oh,
and they never stop.
Oh, well, that helps.
So there are a lot of things that come into play on these maps that you have to, gauge their accuracy. And even like Korea, and there are some maps where Korea is not seen as a peninsula.
It's an island.
It's seen as a little ball.
Oh, okay. All right.
But these people did not trade in Korea, so they just knew it was out there.
Right.
And they knew it stuck out. It was in the ocean.
Right. They could swim. They could.
But they didn't know
go
it was
around
a peninsula,
it a little bit, maybe.
Rather than they thought it was an island.
Yeah, I mean, then they did the traditional surveys where they did this along the east coast of America. They would go in the rivers and see how far they went inland, and they'd write that down, and they would, use a compass and figure out where the next big inlets were, how far they went. That came much later, I'm sure. But your earlier maps, you don't know what year that would be. The earliest.
The Linschoten one?
Yeah.
The Linschoten one, Linschoten, the Archbishop of Goa died around late 1500s, and Linschoten started to make his way back. Interesting story. Make his way back to the Netherlands with these maps. Says he was going to give the maps to the British and the Dutch so they could get to the Spice Islands.
So this is
he
a big.
got
These
caught
are
by pirates, had to escape.
They got the maps.
It took him a couple of years to get back, but that is when, so around the 1600s and then the Dutch start to break free and start to come in Indonesia and become competitors.
Well, maps must have been of any kind back then must have been considered secret documents. I mean,
yeah.
If you had I mean,
If you captured an enemy ship,
right.
the first thing you did was grab their maps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they had information that you might not have.
Right. There's a famous movie with Russell Crowe in it, and they're fighting in the 1700s, I think it is, with the French. And the first thing they do is when the British capture the French ship is they're comparing maps and making changes and, adding more material to their new maps.
Right.
Yeah, it's we live in a very weird world now that a GPS. We complain our GPSs send us to the wrong building.
Well, I mean, I think part of your audience here is military, and military people know the value of accurate maps.
Oh my gosh, yes.
If you're after certain targets and that, you got to know where it is.
Right, terrain, particularly artillery, aircraft, definitely. I'm an old-fashioned kid, Boy Scout, and I learned traditional map, and compass reading maps, and you don't see that anymore. I don't know, in the military, I'm sure you do, but kids today, they don't know anything about it. They can't read a map. You look at it, and says, what do these lines mean? They mean altitudes, So, yeah, I think the computers are destroying us in many ways. I remember when the first calculators came out in the 1970s.
Oh, God,
yeah. They were like, what, $100 to buy one calculator, $100. And then, of course, the prices dropped. But everyone said the same thing, that people would forget how to add and subtract or multiply. I think they still can multiply, by themselves.
Well, I got to tell you a little story with my grandkids, and this is but of all the tech and that, my grandkids have trouble reading cursive writing.
Oh, yeah, that's another problem in America. We have stopped teaching cursive writing. I mean, it's a very flowery writing style. It's like signing your name. It's very beautiful if you know how to do it. But if you haven't learned in elementary school, which was traditionally we were taught, you wouldn't be able to read it later in life.
And if you've got some old-timers out there in your audience that they would remember the Palmer method, learning that in school and how to going with the lines, taught you good handwriting.
It's fun.
I still get praise for my handwriting when people see it.
We were kindergarten. We'd learn cursive, and we get graded on it, and then you'd always have old relatives or older great grandparents or whatever with letters to one another, and you read them, and sometimes they're really difficult to read because the cursive style is just very hard. And whereas other folk could just read it right away. But if you want to see a style of old writing, you can easily look at the U.S. Constitution or the U.S. Government Declaration of Independence, 1776, and all that stuff. And you'll see that exact same beautiful style of writing. But you have a story about your granddaughter.
Yeah, well, I would just said I was talking to my daughter, and writing something out, and she said, "Well, your granddaughters won't necessarily, if you want to write them a letter or something, better print it."
Oh my God! Yeah. Go ahead.
That's just one of those things. It's a shame to see that being lost.
I've been told that they brought it back. Some schools are bringing it back, and it helps to teach creativity in a little bit. You create your own style as well, That's very important. But yeah, you lose something when you lose the cursive style.
Now, John, I probably should tell you why, in a way, I started writing about these history books and mapping of Taiwan and its struggle for democracy. And even I came here, of course, with the building the MRT and worked in Taipei and then in Kaohsiung on that.
What about you worked at the Kaohsiung MRT as well? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Now that's only one line, right?
No, they have two lines there.
Okay.
And the Kaohsiung, it's interesting. I'll give you a different story on that. Well, you were here in Taipei in the early 90s, and you would remember what a mess it was.
Well, we're talking about the pollution, right? And
no, I'm talking about the streets and the excavation and everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of building. There was a lot of excavation,
right.
New buildings everywhere, new bridges. Yeah, it's crazy.
Now, I'm going to give you, because Taipei and Kaohsiung are, in a way, built two different ways. And in Taipei, it's a massive system with many different lines. And, when you start a subway, MRT, you got to do a lot of digging, and there's a lot of disruption on the streets and traffic and that. And someone said, okay, we're going to have to face that. Why don't we do all the lines at once so we'll get it all done quicker? The normal way you do it is you start with a basic cross, two lines crossing, and then do the basics and then keep adding on. And therefore, there's certain areas it's slower, but you're only tearing up certain areas as you progress.
Right.
In Taipei, they started everything
at the same time.
And if you remember, the early 90s, it was really hard to navigate down the streets and that. Kaohsiung is a lot different. Of course, the streets in Kaohsiung are also wider because of the Japanese.
Yeah.
The Japanese saw it as value as a port city and wanted to make it a model city. And therefore, it has much wider streets. It's not as old as Taipei in that sense. So it made the MRT a lot easier down there with, the construction, the digging, not disrupting the lifestyle.
Now, you worked on that line down there as well.
Yeah, I was also in technology transfer down there.
I have one question, and it's a military question. I used to read about occasionally they're digging tunnels here, and they'd find an old American bomb from World War II. Was that does that bring up any memories at all, or they would be digging the tunnels?
Right. Taiwan was heavily bombed by the U.S. and certainly in Kaohsiung area and around the presidential palace in Taipei.
Right. So occasionally your folks would find something.
Right. And we had procedures for handling, I don't remember coming across any when I was here.
Oh, okay.
But
I can imagine.
Yeah, that's always one of those things that, and someone
I want to apologize to the folks in Taipei.
With the hammer.
I was thinking the big drilling bit that they use that turns and drills through the rock, right?
And right.
And it would, I don't know how you would determine you've hit metal or that you should back up and take a look at what you've found. But in Korea, of course, they found a lot of them. And Japan, of course, they found a lot. Tons of these things. So, yeah, but I was surprised that history has been forgotten so much. We seem to live a fast food culture in America, I guess the world now, which is we seem to forget about everything and just throw it away. But
yeah.
Did you like Kaohsiung when you lived there?
I liked Kaohsiung. at that time, the Iha River, Love River, was pretty polluted.
Right.
Frank Shea,
I
when he
remember.
was mayor, would clean it up. But
Yeah.
one distinct memory I have is that watching the dragon boat races in the Kaohsiung at the Love River.
Oh my God.
And I was thinking, God, if I'm in one of those boats and the boat tips over,
Mm.
that river was polluted.
Oh yeah, that was one of the people who
But-
don't remember this, but the Love River down in Kaohsiung was just scary. It smelled horrific. And I remember walking across it one or two times to go to some restaurants and such, and literally barely making it across the bridge walking. It was something else.
But a place
But
I'd
now
like
it's
to
great.
go,
Mm.
there's a place down there, Chechen Island. Remember
Oh, yeah, no, wait a minute. No, I don't. What's it?
that? I used to like to go down there and you get some seafood, take a little ferry out to the island, walk the beach at sunset. Very nice.
Really?
And a university I always wanted to teach at, Sun Yat-sen University, is right on the ocean there, right on the Taiwan Strait. And I said, boy, I would always love to teach here because you'd be like the balcony of your office or
Right.
something. You're looking out on the Taiwan Strait.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like ambiance, where I'm working.
You're a romantic at heart.
Right.
You enjoy those
Definitely.
moments. Yeah. Well, yeah, you have a interesting, you have the complexity of building a subway system underground, MRT system, plus you have the literary background to write books. Well, that's a good combination of skill sets, I guess. And at what point did you think that Taiwan would be your home?
Probably, it's interesting because, my first contract with Bechtel was 2 years.
Mm.
And, I was going, and it took me about a month to decide. It wasn't the money. The money was great. But I was leaving my network, my friends. My kids were in high school. I was divorced at the time.
I see.
So that part was okay, but I was leaving my whole network in the U.S., and the company promised me a bonus of $5,000 U.S. if I finished my contract.
Mm-hmm.
So this is back in '88. Okay, the $5,000 U.S. in '88 was a pretty good chunk of change.
Mm-hmm.
I figured, okay, I can hang on for 2 years and come back and buy a nice car with that $5,000 and carry on in the U.S.
Carry on. Yeah.
And so that was the first. But finally, I took the contract after a month of deciding.
Mm.
And but then with the second contract, the reason I ended up staying was that in the first contract I met my Taiwanese wife.
Oh.
And met her here, and we were dating and that, and we dated, through, and finally, in the second contract, when I was working in Kaohsiung, we decided to get married. So
Okay.
in '92, I got married to Vanica, who is now deceased.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, you're going to follow on the second episode, so stick around and for the next week's episode with Jerome Keating. Dr. Keating has written numerous books, and we'll talk about his love of Taiwan. And thanks a lot for coming.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Cheers.